My son's imaginary friend had legs that bent the wrong way, like the crooked legs of a bird. He said every time his imaginary friend walked, bones would poke out through the skin, yet he was able to move at inhumanly fast speeds, like a character in a video that has been played on fast forward. My son had named his creepy friend Mr. Grimm. Needless to say, I found his new imaginary friend to be a trifle upsetting. When I told my wife about it, she said that it wasn't just upsetting, but absolutely fucking disturbing in every way imaginable.
Why do his bones poke out through his skin? That seems like fairly inappropriate imagery for a 5-year-old.
Maybe it's some subconscious projection for some accident victim he saw on TV. She rolled her eyes at this.
I don't think they show dead car crash victims with their bones sticking out of their skin on Nickelodeon,
she said sarcastically. But we let it go and continued on with our lives as normal. Johnny continued to talk about Mr. Grimm and the adventures they went on, and we just kind of got used to it. After all, children have vivid imaginations, and I wasn't the type to read into things too much. As a parent, I knew sometimes that you just had to go with the flow and let them develop on their own. That was before pets started to go missing in our neighborhood. The entire street became covered in missing posters for local cats and dogs. None of their bodies were ever found. I didn't know what to think about it, so I just didn't. I just continued to go to work, spend time with my wife, and enjoy life as much as I could. I would take Johnny out on weekend outings to amusement parks or nature trails, but one time when we were hiking together, he said something rather disturbing to me.
Mr. Grimm says he knows what happens to the kitties and puppies.
I looked down at him sharply. Johnny, that's not funny. There are some sick people out there. People who kill little animals for no reason. There are people out there who kill kids for no reason. That's why your mom and I always tell you to avoid strangers, and never to get in a car with anyone besides your family. And you shouldn't joke about the missing puppies and kitties.
But Dad, I wasn't joking. Mr. Grimm said he took the puppies and kittens with him to his playground. He said that I could come with him one day too. He says that no one hurts puppies or kitties there, or little kids. He said that we all live forever with him, and that he never lets us go because he loves us all too much and wants to be with us forever.
I looked down at his small, serious face, waves of dread rising in my stomach.
Johnny, Mr. Grimm isn't real. He's just an imaginary friend. That means he comes from your own mind, just like dreams. They might feel real, but they're all inside of you.
He just shook his head at this, like he couldn't believe how slow his old dad was.
You'll see soon, Daddy. Mr. Grimm is as real as you and me. Maybe even realer, because he says he's been here for a long, long time. He says he remembers the roads before there were any cars on them, back when they were all dirt. He says he remembers when horses and donkeys were the only way around. He told me about it.
Johnny, if Mr. Grimm was a real person and what you said was true, he'd have to be over 130 years old. No one has ever lived that long. It isn't possible. Don't get carried away with this Mr. Grimm stuff, because not everyone will understand like your mom and I do. Some people might think it's a little weird. That was the end of the conversation. We continued hiking in silence. I was in deep thought, wondering about all the strange things my son said. The next day, kids started disappearing. It started with the Crabtree boy the next street over. From what I heard, he was playing in the backyard in a sandbox. His mother looked out the window every minute or so while she did the dishes. Then she looked up and he was gone, his toys still in the same position, and his blue baseball cap upside down on the spot where he had been sitting. Miss Crabtree sprinted out, looking around frantically and screaming his name, but he was just gone. No sign of any strangers in the neighborhood, no suspicious cars, no random leads caught by stoplight cameras or doorbell cameras, so ubiquitous in our little suburban neighborhood. There weren't even any footprints in a sandbox, neither the boys or anyone else's, except for the tracks that led to the middle of the sandbox where he had been sitting and playing. It was as if he had been raptured up into heaven in the space of 60 seconds. The police searched for weeks for that little boy, even using helicopters to search the endless woods that started at the north edge of town. Volunteers from around our county joined in, combing every square inch of woods within miles, and diving into the local lakes, and checking abandoned buildings and sewers near the child's house. There was not a sign of him anywhere. It was as if he just vanished in the flash of an eye. After weeks of no news, the attention paid to it slowly started to die down. People forgot about the grieving parents and the missing child, like they always do in these kinds of situations. I was extremely busy at work, doing research into quantum entanglement and quantum computers at our state university. My wife had left to go spend time with her father, who had dementia and cancer, and very suddenly took a turn for the worse. So I ended up having to take Johnny to work. I didn't really mind, as he was a good boy who listened, and very rarely got in trouble. The Mr. Grimm thing was the only weird part of his young personality, but other than that, he was a fast learner, and respectful, acted in many ways like a child much older than himself. We entered the quantum research laboratory, and his little hand holding mine tightly as he stared around with wide blue eyes. It smelled like cleaning chemicals and burning metal throughout the entire chamber, emanating even out into the hallways of the university building. My son wrinkled his tiny nose, making a comically cute face as he did so. I handed him a pair of safety glasses, putting one on myself, before he started up with his usual childlike questioning.
"Daddy, why does it smell like that?"
He asked me, and I shrugged. It's a lot of machines that consume huge amounts of power. This single building can consume as much power as hundreds of houses like ours. Some of the stuff I indicated with a wave of my hand, showing the gleaming circular vats, the massive metal tubes, the dozens of computer monitors, and the tables with entire arrays of green lasers focused on tiny chips. It's so cutting edge that we haven't even found a way to make it use less electricity yet. It can entangle physical particles or make computers that can do certain processes millions of times faster than conventional computers. Most young children would not be able to comprehend the depths of statements like that, but Johnny was not a usual kid. His mind worked incredibly fast, and his vocabulary seemed much more developed than normal 5-year-olds.
"Okay,"
Johnny said simply, letting go of my hand so I could hang up our coats and put a little plastic bag of food in the fridge. It was late, past dinner time on a Friday, and so the entire lab was already deserted. I was one of the few physicists who did much of his work at night, when all the equipment was open and I had the entire building to myself. On nights like this, I could play classical music on its highest volume, just be myself. I started playing an MP3 of Shostakovich on one of many monitors around the lab, then began to move around and switch all the equipment on. My son sat in the corner, using colored pencils to draw while I worked. Tonight I was using AI to try to increase quantum entanglement from just a few particles to a small diamond. Having turned all the cameras and monitoring equipment on, I activated the processor and watched all the lasers move in unison on the nearby laboratory table, now pointing at the diamond I had set in the middle of the setup. Johnny looked up as the computers all grew louder. I motioned for him to come close, to show him the most interesting part of the entire experiment. A humming, vibrating noise began to spread throughout the floor, as the argon lasers became too bright to look at. I put an arm around Johnny, reassuring him. Suddenly, something began to go terribly wrong. The humming vibrations, which had been wave-like and measured, now began to come in chaotic, pulsing waves. The argon lasers began to falter and move out of position, burning holes in the tables and walls. An enormous crash of rending metal and glass came from behind me, and I quickly jumped on Johnny, tackling him to the floor, protecting him with my own body until it would all be over. As another computer station fell over, sending shards of glass flying that sliced into my left arm, leaving large droplets of blood on the floor next to us, the power finally went out, and we were submerged in blackness. All I could hear now was Johnny's heavy breathing mixing with my own. Then, suddenly, I heard skittering footsteps of something large coming from my right.
Is it over?
Johnny asked in a trembling voice. I think so, kiddo, I said reassuringly, getting off of him and slowly standing up in the pitch dark. I fumbled in my pockets for my cell phone, turning on the flashlight app and shining it around. At first, I saw only destruction, smashed monitors, smoking computers, massive holes everywhere. I thought to myself how lucky we were that the whole place hadn't gone up in flames. As I kept turning, though, I saw something far more horrific. The small boy stood in the corner with black, stringy hair. His skin looked drained of blood, white as a vampire's, blood constantly bubbling out of his mouth, sliding down his chin in red streaks. He wore the ragged remains of what might have been a plaid shirt and jean shorts, but they were so bloody and torn that it was impossible to tell. His bare legs were bent the wrong way. He started to walk towards me slowly, like a bird, his knees bending backwards. The bones stuck out through his shins, calves, and thighs, and then as he walked, a nauseating cracking sound echoed around the room, like bone loudly crushing and breaking against other pieces of itself.
"Hiya there,"
he said in deep gurgling speech.
"My name, as you surely know, is Mr. Grimm. I'm a friend of your son's, and I hope soon a friend of yours."
I stood there, speechless, shining my light on this abomination. He bowed slightly, waved his thin, bony arm around the room.
"Sorry for the destruction, but I had to take any means to materialize, and the massive amounts of energy in this room was able to give me the physical form I needed. I couldn't keep on as some minor poltergeist."
He laughed at this, spraying tiny droplets of blood on the floor in front of him as he did so. I didn't see the humor in it. "Look," I said, putting my hands up, as if I were dealing with a rabid dog. "I'm sorry for any misunderstanding, but you need to go back to where you came from. This is not okay. My son and I cannot have a... what was he exactly? A monster? A demon?" Mr. Grimm waved away my objections with a flick of his hand.
"That is not up to you, Jack,"
he said congenially.
"You cannot send me back, and if you try to stop me, I will kill your son in front of you, and then I will kill you too."
My son's little hand tightened on me. I felt him trembling behind me.
Daddy, I'm scared.
He whispered to me in a low voice.
I want to go home.
I know, Johnny. I do too. But what could I do? I had no gun. I wasn't sure if this thing could even be killed anyway. At that moment, the backup generators kicked on, and the laboratory was filled with the glow of red emergency lights. "All right," I said, reaching a decision. "My son and I are leaving. Do not follow us." I had decided to call 911 and let the professionals deal with this. Maybe they would call in the National Guard, I thought with a small smile. They could fill this thing full of enough full auto weapons fire to leave them looking like Swiss cheese.
I'm sorry, but I need your son."
He smiled at me, an eerie, ear-to-ear grin that showed all of his bloody teeth and countless sores on his blackened gums.
"I used a lot of energy materializing, and I need food. I will let you live, however, Jack."
His smile widened, as if he were offering me some kind of present.
"Just leave the boy, get in your car, and drive home. You can live a full life."
As he spoke, I got an idea. We were much closer to the door than Mr. Grimm. I quickly dropped my phone in my pocket, picked up a large computer, and hurled it at Mr. Grimm's broken legs. I heard a demonic cry of pain, his voice sounding like dozens of voices, crying at once in a disharmonious shriek. Ignoring it, I picked up Johnny and ran outside the lab. The door had a number pad on it. I pressed the top button and began rotating the thumb turn away from the hinges, unlocking the thick wooden door just as something heavy crashed into it on the other side. The knob turned furiously, but it wouldn't budge without the correct numerical code. "Okay, that should buy us some time," I said, quietly grabbing Johnny's hand and running out through the blood-red emergency lights. The laboratory began erupting into a cacophony of breaking equipment as I called 911, informing them of an intruder, telling them that the man was likely armed and dangerous. Then I got Johnny to my car. We sped out of there, my adrenaline still high, my heart beating hard in my chest. The police ended up finding the laboratory destroyed, but empty. As the days went on, I wondered if the entire thing was some sort of shared delusion. But then kids started disappearing from our town and the surrounding towns at an alarming rate. I bought a gun for protection, and my neighbors and I began to do a local neighborhood watch. One time, while I was out patrolling in the middle of the night, I saw that thing again, Mr. Grimm. I could tell it was him instantly from the way he walked, the crunching of shattered bones and superhuman speed as he disappeared into the backyard of a nearby house. And I followed him quietly, checking that the safety on my gun was off. I saw a child exiting the back door of his house as Mr. Grimm crept in the bushes. The child looked hypnotized, his eyes totally blank. Mr. Grimm waved his hand, clicked his tongue, and a small spark of light in the middle of the backyard expanded to show a massive, brightly colored playground. Even though it was night here, on the playground it was daytime, and I saw countless kids in it. Some of them were hung in nooses by their necks from the monkey bars, and others were buried alive up to their heads in the sandbox. He had even crucified a few on the wooden beams of the playset, nailing their hands and feet together as rivulets of blood dripped into the sandbox below. They all had their mouths opened in a shared, silent scream as the hypnotized child walked quietly towards the vision. "No, no, stop!" I said, raising my gun to point it directly at Mr. Grimm's head. He snarled like a rabid dog at me, beginning to run at me with superhuman speed, his bent legs snapping, popping, and I fired. His head exploded in a shower of black, rotted flesh and maggots, the smell of decomposing meat filling the air. Behind him, the vision slowly closed back into a pinprick of light, and then went out entirely. I called the police, telling them the truth, keeping an eye on the strange demonic body of Mr. Grimm as I did so. It wasn't the police that ended up showing up, but some secretive federal agency that quickly took possession of the body and swore me to secrecy, giving me a check for $100,000 in exchange for signing an NDA that stated I would never tell anyone about the supernatural events that occurred in the last few weeks. I gladly took the check and then signed the document. After all, who would believe me? It really freaked me out when I discovered the first one. Not that it doesn't now, but the first was a massive shock to the system. I mean, who wouldn't be downright horrified at the sight of a dead girl dangling from a tree branch? The one who put her there, that's who. I was 18 when I came across a mutilated corpse. That day will always stick out in my mind. It was ground zero, a catalyst for the demented circus act that my life would devolve into. Little did I know it would be all downhill from there. Cheer up, dude. Being held back isn't the end of the world. It just means you get more opportunities to hit on that cute sophomore you've been crushing on. Jacob smirked, nudging my arm. I sighed. It's not the end of the world, it might as well be. While all of you get to prance across that stage, I'll be stuck shoveling shit in the pig pen. Jacob stayed silent, A breeze swept through the air, rustling the crisp brown and yellow leaves that littered the ground. He knew I was right. I was a farmer's son. My father viewed me as nothing more than free labor, an otherwise useless, good-for-nothing piece of equipment to be tossed to the curb once I lost my value. And with how abhorrent my grades were, I wasn't exactly proving him wrong. I mean, look on the bright side. Maybe you can... Jacob trailed off, and I nearly bumped into him. What gives, man? You can't just stop right in front of me like that. I grumbled, beginning to step around him. Jacob suddenly reached out and grabbed my arm. A pang of fear jolted through my chest. Jacob was a thin, bony boy with less muscle than SpongeBob SquarePants. Nevertheless, he maintained a grip so tight around my wrist that I thought it might snap. Before I could ask him what in the world he thought he was doing, he pointed to a tree in a nearby clearing. That's when I noticed the body. My heart plummeted into my stomach. Adrenaline surged through my veins as my fight or flight began to kick in. Though every synapse in my brain screamed at me to run, I found myself glued to the spot. Grayson, is that what I think it is? Jacob muttered, shattering my morbid reverie. I'm pretty sure. What do we do? Should we call the cops? How has no one seen it by now? I'm going to take a closer look, Jacob murmured as he started to trudge toward the suspended remains. I debated on leaving. I wanted to put as much distance between me and that gruesome scene as I possibly could, but in the end, my curiosity won out. I can't believe I'm doing this, I mumbled, trotting to catch up to my friend. We continued to walk through the open field until we stood directly in front of it. I don't know why, but I hadn't expected the smell. The putrid stench of rotten decay swam into my nostrils well before we reached the cadaver. It nearly made me gag from how overpowering it was. Once we were right up on it, I was really able to drink in its features. The deceased was a woman. It made me nauseous the way her corpse was softly swaying in the wind. Thin black hair clung to her blood-spattered nightgown. I think it was white at one time, but the fabric had degraded to a deep yellow. Her brittle, pallid appendages hung limply, never to regain mobility again. But worst of all was her face. The woman's pale blue eyes were bulging from her skull. Dried blood trailed down from the sockets, down her cheeks, and eventually pulled at the noose secured tightly around her neck. That was what really got me. Her eyes. I could still see the pain and fear behind each of her protruding irises, and my heart absolutely shattered for her. I couldn't stand to look any longer. Jacob, I'm calling the police. We shouldn't be here. What if the killer is hiding nearby? He turned to me, mouth still slightly agape. Yeah, the cops. You're right, let's go. Jacob and I returned to the sidewalk where we had first noticed the woman, while I dialed 911. The phone rang for longer than it should have, before the operator's voice cut through the line.
911, what is your emergency?
The woman sounded exhausted, like years upon years of 2 packs a day were whittling down her lung capacity. Hi, yes, I found a dead body. Can you send somebody to, I don't know, take her to the morgue, I guess?
What's your location? Emergency services will be en route momentarily.
Coming up on the intersection of Maple Road and Cherry Street. Please, hurry, The operator suddenly cleared her throat, effectively cutting me off.
Pardon me, but you said the intersection of Maple Road and Cherry Street, yes?
My brows furrowed. The lady on the other end of the line had dropped her reassuring facade. She sounded almost accusatory. Yeah, that's right.
Sir, Please continue to go about your day. Nothing is out of the ordinary at the intersection of Cherry and Maple. Services will not be dispatched.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Everything was normal. I'd just seen a fucking lynching victim with my own 2 eyes, and the operator was telling me that that was normal. No, maybe you misheard me. I said there's a dead body. I need you to send someone. The line was silent for a tense moment before the woman's voice cut back over my phone speaker.
Please do not submit a false report again, or you will face legal repercussions. Have a nice day.
This isn't a joke. Hello? Hello? My persistence did no good, and the operator hung up on me. So what did they say? Are they sending someone? Jacob asked, gazing up at me expectantly. No, actually, I said, lowering the phone from my ear. They told me nothing was wrong. I was left in complete shock for the remainder of the day. If the police wouldn't take me seriously, it left me little choice but to go home and try to erase it from my memory, but I just couldn't. The image of that woman's lifeless corpse was permanently seared into my brain. I felt like I owed it to her to find justice, or at the very least, someone to give her a proper burial.
Grayson, dinner!
Mom shouted. I'll be there in a second. I yelled back, gently placing the last of the freshly laid eggs in my basket. The one good thing about being an involuntary farmhand, it helped me keep my mind occupied. At least it was good for something. I silently joined my parents at the table. Mom set a plateful of meatloaf and mashed potatoes before me. Normally I would have demolished it, but in light of what I had witnessed earlier that day, I didn't know if my appetite would ever come back.
Why aren't you eating, honey? You've barely touched your potatoes. Is something wrong?
Mom asked, a twinge of concern percolating her words. Yeah, so this is gonna sound crazy, but spit it out, boy. Dad interjected through a mouthful of food. I saw a dead body today. My parents locked eyes with one another. Dad gulped down his food, but he didn't motion to take another bite. Mom stared silently at him, sweat beading on her brow.
That was probably nothing. Just a leftover display from Halloween.
Mom chuckled nervously. Your mother is right, Dad affirmed, flashing me a toothy grin. It was probably just a figment of your imagination. No need for concern. The fork trembled in his grasp as he stabbed a slab of meatloaf.
Don't worry about finishing dinner. You can be excused if you're not hungry,
Mom said, and that anxious smile still plastered to her face. Thanks. I'm gonna take you up on that offer. I scooted my chair out from the table and returned to my duties. I didn't want to spend any more time around my folks that evening. They were acting strange, and I didn't like it one bit. Trepidation bubbled up in my gut as Jacob and I walked to school. The trip was marred by a tense, uneasy silence. Then Jacob said what was on both of our minds. Grayson, do you think she's still there? I sure hope not, I said, keeping my eyes locked to the ground. We each subconsciously held our breaths as we approached the clearing. I prayed that the woman would be gone. My heart palpitated wildly in my chest, blood rushing into my ears. I clenched my eyes shut just as we came into view. And there it was. A grass clearing sat before us. Daisies and dandelions swayed among the lush green blades. I peered beyond it, into the trees. I suddenly grew lightheaded, and she was still there. The woman's lifeless, decaying corpse hung from the rope, those horrible, unblinking eyes visible even from our distance. I felt like I was going to be sick. The cops had completely ignored my call. Without warning, Jacob took off in a dead sprint, and I gave chase, my legs pumping as fast as they could carry me. We ran and ran, all the way until we reached the school. I didn't even need to ask Jacob why he had done it. I was probably going to do the same eventually. I couldn't focus for the remainder of the day. The hands on the clock seemed to tick by in slow motion. I couldn't stop thinking about her. Those bulging, desperate eyes. I couldn't escape them. After the longest day of my life, I again found myself by Jacob's side, walking home. We didn't say anything to each other. We just kept going, dreading the encounter that we knew would come. We gradually approached the clearing. I couldn't do it. Not again. But I had to. It was like a train wreck. Something so demented and screwed up that you just can't bring yourself to look away. All right, man. I'm going to run the rest of the way. Your call if you want to come with, Jacob said, already turning away from me. Go ahead. I'll join you in a sec, I muttered, wondering if I was making the right decision. Suit yourself, Jacob retorted, averting his gaze from the field before jogging past. This was it, the last time. One more look, and then I'd never peer into those woods again. I was done. That's what I told myself, at least. I stilled my resolve and quickly glanced at the tree that I had previously seen the woman hanging from. I immediately regretted it. I bent over and lost my lunch all over the dried leaves littering the ground, because when I glanced up at that tree, the woman wasn't alone. There was a man dangling from the branch opposite her, connected to the bough from an almost identical noose. His eyes mirrored the woman's. Two fear-struck, bloodied orbs jutting from his head, congealed viscous liquid oozing down his cheek. I couldn't take it any longer. I sprinted after Jacob and didn't stop until I reached my house. What was even going on? Were the cops working with a serial killer? Even if they were, why wouldn't they at least come pick up the bodies? Fortunately, I never received the answer to some of those questions. Some, but not all. It didn't stop with those two. Bodies began appearing in the trees at an alarming rate, and they weren't just confined to the clearing anymore. The dead were popping up everywhere, in the big oak by the library, in the maple tree in front of town hall. Hell, a dead man even showed up hanging from the beech tree on the school's front lawn. Only once was it ever anyone I recognized. I knew Kent Taylor, and he was the owner of a little diner off of Main Street. He was one of the nicest men I'd ever met. When his body appeared swinging from a rope on my walk home, I burst into tears. He didn't deserve that. None of them did. I desperately wanted to get to the bottom of the whole thing, but what could I do? No one was willing to talk about it, and the police were utterly useless. I tried to contact them multiple times, but in the end I was given a warning for submitting a false report. I was caught between a rock and a hard place. So, left with seemingly no other option, I turned a blind eye. Obviously I was terrified beyond belief. I think we all were. Everyone seemed on edge, like we were all anticipating something that none of us wanted to acknowledge. Time marched slowly by, agonizingly so. Each day felt longer than its predecessor. Still, after what seemed like an eternity, the day finally came. Jacob's graduation. A whirlwind of emotions swirled within me as I sat and watched my classmates walk across the stage. Huge, content grins were plastered across their faces, the light in their eyes burning brightly. It should have been me up there, accepting my diploma. It wasn't fair that all my peers got to escape this hellhole while I was forced to endure for another year. It just wasn't. I waved as Jacob accepted his diploma from the dean, and he beamed back at me, not a worry in the world. Though jealousy burned inside me like a hot iron, I managed to suppress it. I wished so badly that I could have adopted Jacob's same carefree attitude, even just for a moment. Now, I'm not so sure. Once the ceremony was complete, I swam through the crowd to meet my friend. Just a quick congratulations and I'd be on my way. No point in sticking around any longer. "Jacob, congrats, buddy," I said, clasping him on the shoulder. He reciprocated my greeting with a warm smile. "Thank you, Gray. I really appreciate you coming. I would have understood if you wanted to stay home. Hell no, I wouldn't miss it for the world." Jacob chuckled, his grin growing even wider. Even if I was consumed by envy, that didn't make me any less proud of him. "It really does mean a lot to me, more than you know. Heck, I might even miss this place a little bit because of you," he quipped, drawing a smile to my own face. I lightly slugged him in the arm. "Oh, who are you kidding? You and I both know that won't happen. Remind me again, where are you running off to this summer?" "Landed an internship at Prentice Financial. I'll be going to Boston for the next couple of months, remember?" "Oh yeah, I do remember you telling me that now. Live it up for the both of us, man. And try not to forget about me, okay? It's gonna be real lonely around here without you, you know." "Me? Forget about you? Wouldn't dream of it," he said, shooting me a wink. 2 weeks from that date, Jacob was scheduled to fly out. I didn't get to see him off, but I wished him the best. I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary at first, not until he started ignoring my texts. I thought that maybe he had just been busy with the move. I mean, it's stressful to leave the place you've called home for your entire life and start anew. I couldn't shake the feeling something was wrong, though. I should have listened to my gut. It was another 3 days before I found him. Dad had sent me to the corner store to pick up some salt when I happened to glance up at the tree overshadowing the old-timey little shop. I will never forget what I saw. Jacob's lifeless corpse stared back at me. His eyes bulged from his skull, and tiny rivulets of dry blood streamed down his cheeks. My heart was shattered and simultaneously began to race in my chest. Jacob, my best friend in the entire world, was strung up like a puppet. Not a single soul acknowledged him. I dropped to my knees and wept. I cried and cried, ignoring strange looks from passers-by. It wasn't right. Jacob never hurt a fly. He didn't deserve to die. Not like that. I stood back up with the newfound rage bubbling within me. I was going to find out who did this to him. I was going to make them pay. I abandoned the salt on the sidewalk. I didn't care what Dad would say. He could get his own damn salt if he needed it so badly. I continued on my warpath, straight to the place that I knew I could find some answers. Jacob's house. I knocked furiously on the front door, anger simmering over all the while. Jacob's parents would tell me something. They had to. Jacob's mother answered the door. Her eyes were puffy and sullen, like she had been crying for days on end. I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Her only son was brutally murdered. The police didn't give two shits about it. That extinguished my ire just a bit. "Miss Allen, please don't blow me off. I need to know who did this to him and why." Tears began to cloud my vision. The reality of my grim discovery still hadn't fully set in. "Did what? To whom?" she replied. Her voice was defeated and hoarse, as if she was hiding something. "You know who. Jacob. Your son. I found his body by the corner store. Please, Miss Ellen, please tell me who did this."
Jacob? No, Jacob is in Boston. He's an intern. My boy's doing just fine,"
she replied despondently, staring into space.
"Jacob is not fine. Please, you have to. It was nice of you to stop by, Grayson. Tell your parents we said hello."
And with that, the door shut in my face. It's been 2 days since then. I have a theory, and I'm going to test it. And I have to know, for Jacob's sake. I think whoever is doing this is killing anyone who tries to leave. And so tonight, I'm going to find out for myself if that's true. I've got a cousin who lives in a major city. She said it's okay if I crash at her place for a while. Either I'm going to get out of here, or I'm going to die trying. I'm going to take Dad's pickup truck and pray that it doesn't give out on me. I'm posting this in case I don't make it out. Please heed my warning. If you drive through a town called Walnut Valley, northern Kentucky, don't stick around, because if you do, you might not make it out alive. There's a church not far from where I live. It's practically falling apart. The stained glass windows are all shattered and their beautiful patterns no longer visible. Leaning at a precarious angle, the spire looks as though it's inches away from collapsing, falling to the ground and crushing the neglected structures beneath. Maybe it would have been better if it did. Sitting alone atop a large hill, it cuts through the horizon like an eyesore. It's been that way for as long as anyone can remember, abandoned for years now. No one goes there at all. The place has been condemned, but as of yet, there's been no demolition crew sent to knock it down. It's just been left, discarded. You'd be forgiven for forgetting it even existed, sitting there silently. That is until around 11 p.m. At exactly 11 p.m. each night, the bells in the abandoned tower ring out, resonating throughout my village, sounding exactly 11 times before being cut abruptly short. Nobody talks about it. They just try their best to ignore it. I've asked my parents about it several times, but each time they've gotten cagey and told me not to worry about it before quickly changing the subject. When I was younger, my best friend Todd and I attended the local Catholic school in the village. Neither of us were particularly religious, neither were our families, but it was one of the best schools in the area, and more importantly, the closest. We were playing in the playground one afternoon, pretending to be explorers with a couple of sticks that we had found. Todd was the lead explorer, and I was his trusted first mate, setting out on our epic adventure. Each area of the playground was a separate island, and we were determined to explore all of them before the lunch bell sounded again. We had explored most of the playground when we bumped into Johnny. Johnny was a few years above us in school. He was friends with Todd's older sister. He was walking the other way towards a large group of his friends, waving as he saw us. "What are you guys doing?" he said inquisitively. raising an eyebrow and casually gesturing to the stick in our hands. "Exploring," Todd shouted back in a gleeful voice. "We've got hiking sticks and everything." "You guys are so strange," said Johnny, rolling his eyes. "No wonder no one thinks you're cool. If you're going to explore, there are way better places than here." "Oh yeah," said Todd. "Like where, then, smartass?" "Ever seen that abandoned church at the top of the hill? That one that's collapsing?" Well, Gavin, a guy who works at the convenience store by the petrol station, told me that there's something about that place. Apparently, some priest, Father Davis, went mad there years ago. Full on insane. He started raving about demons in the walls and voices whispering to him at night. Proper paranoid stuff. Anyway, one evening the bells rang at 11 p.m. Davis apparently never normally rang them after 9 p.m. He didn't want to keep everyone in the village up, so everyone thought it was odd. They rang 11 times before stopping dead. A bunch of guys from the village went up there to check on him to make sure everything was okay. I guess they thought he was calling for help or something. They found him there, hanging, his neck tangled in the ropes of the bell pulls. He had jumped from the platform at the top with them tied around his neck like a noose. The weight of his hanging body was what caused the bells to ring as he frantically flailed and jerked. Anyway, Gavin told me that Davis's ghost still haunts that place, wandering around, ringing the bells at 11 p.m. He said that anyone who stays there till 11 p.m. is never heard from again. Pretty creepy, huh? What a load of bull, Todd loudly interrupted. Ooh, spooky Father Davis. That story's older than me. Everyone knows it's made up. I'm not going to lie. Johnny's story had unnerved me. As I said, we went to a Catholic school, so stories about the abandoned church were somewhat of a taboo subject. Everyone in the school had heard them, though. Rumors of suicides, something sinister living in the church, ringing the bells each night as though in eternal torment. They were kind of a local legend, but nobody seriously believed them. Still, I'd not heard this version before, with the gruesome details about Father Davis's demise, nor the warning about the people who had stayed there till after 11 p.m. The whole thing sent a shiver down my spine. Bullshit, are they? Well, if you're so brave then, I'm sure you'll have no problem staying the night then, will you? Johnny leered, a smug grin flashing across his face. Damn right I won't, Todd said defiantly. But if I can stay the night there, then... Taking a moment to think, Todd continued, I get your PlayStation. Ha! Yeah, whatever. I'll believe it when I see it. And if you stay the night there, you can have my PlayStation. You won't do it anyway, Johnny laughed. Just have it ready for Monday and bring your games. You won't need them anymore, said Todd cockily. Just then, the school bell rang, signaling the end of our lunch break. We joined the throng of other children making their way back inside. As we walked through the corridors to our classroom, I shook Todd's arm nervously. You're not actually going to that church, are you? I asked, hoping that Todd's bravado had all been for show. Yeah, I am. I've got a PlayStation to win. Why, you chickening out? Wait, what? Since when was I involved in this? I asked, taken aback. Since one, you're my best friend, so I assumed you'd want in on this action, and two, I need a witness to prove to Johnny that I've actually done it, said Todd, matter-of-factly. Can't you just take a picture or something? I asked, a pang of hope in my voice. You're not chickening out on me now, are you? Come on, you don't really believe all that crap about that place. It's not real. The place is just old and falling apart. There's no such thing as ghosts or ghouls. There's probably something living in the bells or something. Not undead preachers, said Todd. Although he tried to hide it, I could make out a slight tinge of annoyance in his tone. A pang of guilt welled up in my throat. Todd was my best friend. He was determined to do this, and I was trying to worm my way out of going just because of some spooky, made-up story that I'd heard. I sighed heavily. Okay, fine. I'll come. but I gotta go on the PlayStation when you get it." We spent the rest of the afternoon trying to come up with a way that we could both sneak out without our parents becoming suspicious. After tossing several ideas back and forth, we settled on telling each of our parents that we were staying at each other's house. That way they wouldn't worry about where we were, and we would be free to go and stop in that church before making our way home in the morning. The end of school came and went, and before long it was beginning to get dark. Todd and I had agreed to meet at the entrance to the footpath that leads to the abandoned church at 5 p.m. I'd made it there with plenty of time, telling my parents that Todd was expecting me at 4:30 just to make sure that there was no holdups. I was standing waiting for Todd, fidgeting with the straps on my backpack, when I found myself staring at the church. Something about it made my skin crawl. I don't know if it was the decaying appearance of the place, the eerie stillness in the air, or the oppressive size of the ruin. The story Johnny had told us earlier in the day floated to the front of my mind as my eyes traced their way over the leaning spire, images of a man hanging from the bell pulls, twitching and flailing, filling my mind. Shaking my head, I tried to brush them off. I still couldn't shake the unnerving feeling I was getting. A voice from behind made me jump, snapping my attention back to here and now. What a shithole! Todd strolled up next to me, supporting a large backpack. "Well, let's get it over with," he said, before beginning to make his way up the path. We walked for a short while along the neglected path, forcing our way through the overgrown sections of brambles and weeds before we came to a large chain-link fence. It spanned the entire path, stretching on as far as we could see in either direction. A large yellow sign affixed to the closest panel read, "Warning, condemned, keep out." Another wave of apprehension washed over me as I read it. We really shouldn't be here, even if it wasn't haunted. It wasn't safe. I turned to voice my concerns to Todd, but he was already halfway up the fence, pivoting himself over before dropping down carefully on the other side. "Come on, get your ass over here," said Todd with a smile. Fighting with the warning screaming around in my head, I tentatively climbed the fence, swinging over and dropping down into the overgrown grass on the other side. I could see all of the church clearly from here now, its large, imposing figure looming over us. The walls were crumbling, patches of bare brick and worn sculptures covering its surface. Gaping holes where its windows used to be were surrounded by vines, climbing their way up the walls and into the holes like veins, snaking their way through skin. As we approached the front of the church, we could see the doors, heavy, wooden. One was wide open, the other hanging from a single hinge at the bottom, allowing us to clearly see the large open hall before us. Shattered wooden pews lay strewn across the thick wooden floor. Shards of the stained glass glinted in beams of sunlight from the roof cutting through the gloom. Thin stalks of plants and grasses had wiggled their way up between the cracks in the floorboards, attempting to reach the delicate beams of sunlight that promised warmth in their otherwise bleak home. The church is completely silent. I can only hear the sounds of mine and Todd's footsteps, reverberating around in my eardrums, almost echoing. There's a musty smell that seems to be emanating from beyond, a stale smell of age and stillness. As we make our way through the broken doors, that stench getting stronger, I have to force myself to step over the threshold. There's something about this place that feels oppressive. I'm not sure if it's the rundown look of the place, the fact that I can see the spire through sections of the roof, leaning there, threatening to fall at any minute, or if it's something else. Either way, I can't help but feel like we're not welcome, like this place wants to be left alone. "Well, let's have a look around, and I get first pick of the bedrooms," said Todd jokingly as he set off deeper into the hall. At the end of the hall, some distance away from the back wall, was a crumbling stone altar. Much like the rest of the building, time had not been kind to it, wearing away entire sections of it, so it now resembled a large boulder rather than a solid slab. Still, my attention was focused not on the altar, but on the colossal structure behind it. At least 18 feet tall, made of what looked to be solid, thick wood painted a dark black, was a crucifix. As we got closer to the altar, it seemed to loom over us oppressively. Something about it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. "Right, it looks like there are 2 doors," said Todd, gesturing to the large wooden doors on the back wall either side of the altar. Imitating Fred from Scooby-Doo, he continued, "So let's split up and look for clues." Eyes darting between the 2 doors, I couldn't help the feeling of unease that clung to me since we started up the path. Do we have to? Can't we both just check the same one?
"What? You scared? There's nothing here. Listen."
Todd held his hand to his ear and strained his face in exaggerated concern. Silence. "See? Nothing. If you see something, just shout to me and I'll come save you." "Whatever. Let's get this over with then," I said, exasperated. Todd was my best friend, but he knew how to push my buttons sometimes. I tentatively made my way over to the door on the right of the altar, that feeling of apprehension growing stronger with each step. Reaching out my hand for the handle, brushing off a layer of thick dust before grasping it firmly in my hand. The metal felt cold to my touch, rusted in places where the paint had peeled away over the eons. With a great deal of effort, I managed to convince my protesting hand to turn the handle. It didn't budge, its round form staying perfectly still as though firmly locked. I tried again, jiggling it back and forth in case it was seized. After all, it must have been years since anyone tried to move it.
"Whoa, dude, check this out!"
I heard Todd shout from the other end of the hall. Looking over, his door was wide open, his grinning face sticking out from just behind it. "You're not going to believe this!" Intrigued, I made my way over to his room, noting the smell of the age and decay that seemed to have suddenly intensified as though it was cascading through the now unobstructed opening. Passing through the stone frame, I was able to clearly see what Todd was in awe of. This was the ringing chamber. Looking up, I could clearly see all the way through the spire as it loomed over us, leaning threateningly. The bells at the top were shining in the now setting sun, and their ropes dangling down like thick tendrils, time fraying at their edges. As I stood there in awe, staring at the tower above me, I couldn't help but notice the eerie feeling crawling across my scalp. Images of Father Davis floated to the surface of my mind, his lifeless body tangled in the snake-like ropes, bouncing to the tune of the bells.
"Pretty cool, eh?"
asked Todd expectantly.
"What was behind your door, anyway?"
"Oh, nothing. I couldn't get it open," I replied, not taking my eyes off the ropes above me. "Oh, that sucks. Well, looks like we have a choice of rooms tonight then. This one or the big one. I don't fancy staying directly underneath the leaning bell tower of Pisa personally. Call me crazy, but I don't want to wake up buried by crappy ancient churches," said Todd as he began to make his way back to the main hall. Satisfied with our exploration of the only 2 rooms available to us, we set up in the main hall, ready to stop for the night. I was less than thrilled with staying in here, to be honest. The main hall or the ringing chamber, they both had an oppressive, eerie feeling to them, like there was something watching me. We set ourselves up by the altar, between the 2 rooms. We'd had to be careful exactly what we had taken with us so as not to arouse suspicion from our parents, but each of us had managed to bring a lamp and some blankets, as well as a few snacks. Pretty soon after that, it began to get dark. We could barely make out the end of the hall in the dim lamplight. The whole church seemed to take on an even more oppressive feeling in the darkness, the broken windows now looking like a portal into a dark abyss. It was still completely silent, other than the odd creaking of the wooden beams overhead or behind the jammed door. The first time I heard them, I nearly jumped out of my skin, a loud crack echoing through the dark silence. and Todd was in hysterics as I jumped to my feet, looking around frantically for the source of the sound. "It's just the old building settling, either that or falling apart. Either way," he laughed. My heart rate beginning to slow down slightly, I sat back down, although I could still hear the blood pounding in my ears. We sat there for hours, passing the time by talking about what games we would get for our new PlayStation or making jokes at one another. It was almost enough to make me forget where I was. Almost. Occasionally, as we were laughing, I could swear I felt a cold whooshing of air rushing past me, causing the hairs on the back of my neck to stand on end. The air in here was still and cool for the most part, so the freezing wind always came as a shock. I asked Todd about it and if he had felt it too, but he had just shrugged. "It's an old building, dude. All the windows are smashed." I opened my mouth to reply when a sound reached my ears and stopped me in my tracks. It seemed to resonate through me as all the color drained from my face and I felt the cold wind again, the ringing of a bell. I stared at Todd, wide-eyed, looking for some kind of reassurance. His face mirrored mine, shock and fear spreading across it, and the sound of the clanging bells resonating through us. Before I could even think, Todd got to his feet, making his way toward the ringing chamber. "What the hell are you doing?" I managed to force out in a whisper. "I need to see what it is. This has got to be in our heads, or an animal climbing the ropes or something," Todd replied, but the tremor in his voice betrayed his confidence. He turned and quickly began making his way to the door to the left of the altar, swinging it wide open. I was paralyzed with fear, the bell tolling again, echoing through me. Summoning a great deal of effort, I forced myself to stand and start moving towards the now open doorway. I needed to get to Todd. I didn't want to be alone here in this decrepit place. I broke into a small run before rounding the doorframe and entering the ringing chamber. What I saw made me stop dead in my tracks. The ropes, previously still and frayed, were now bouncing violently to some kind of sick, unknowable rhythm. A fetid stench filled the room, and the smell of age and rot filling our lungs. I could see Todd just ahead of me, his face pale and his eyes wide, his gaze angled upwards, staring. Against the screaming warnings of my mind, I could feel my vision slowly shifting upwards, further into the writhing ropes. As my gaze rose and the ropes tugged violently back and forth, my eyes locked onto the source of the movement, and all the blood drained from my face. At the center of the mass of flailing tendrils, I could clearly make out the puffy, blue face of a man. It was flailing and jerking erratically, throwing its limbs in violent, desperate motions. The wide, bloodshot eyes were rolling around, bulging in their sockets, a stream of blood trickling from the nose and open mouth. A thick rope was wrapped tightly around his neck, causing it to jut out at an odd angle. Clad in a black cassock, its withered blue hands were clawing at it, in a desperate attempt to get free. The corpse appeared to swing with the clang of the ringing bells, fueled by its frantic, desperate movements. I wanted to scream. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs, get out of that place and never go back. All I could manage was a pained whimper. As soon as the sound left my lips, the corpse stopped its flailing, turning its decaying head towards me. Its eyes swiveled around and locked onto mine. I could feel the fear and pain in its gaze as it slowly opened its mouth to scream. But all I could hear was a strangled wheeze. It reached out a decaying hand towards Todd and I, before again letting out another wretched wheezing scream. Screaming at the top of my lungs, I grabbed Todd's arm, pulling him as hard as I could. He snapped out of his stupor, turning with me, running as fast as our legs would carry us. All the while, that same wheezing scream echoed throughout our heads. We needed to get out. We just needed to get out and get home. As we charged into the main hall, I could see the broken doors leading to the outside, to safety. Then, another sound cut through the wheezing screams. I was focusing so hard on running that I barely registered it. A deep, gurgling laugh came from the darkness to my right, just behind the altar. In my peripheral vision, I swear I could see something just on the edge of the lamplight, touching the base of the crucifix. It was large, dark, with a red tinge to it. It almost looked like a foot breaching the edge of the light before quickly withdrawing. It wasn't any kind of foot that I recognized. I swear it had claws. I was too scared to turn around and get a proper look, too focused on getting the hell out of here and away from this haunted place. I pushed forward, about to throw myself across the threshold and out into the outside world, when I heard a blood-curdling scream from just behind me before seeing Todd, his face a mask of abject terror, sprinting past me at a reckless pace. His face was deathly pale, and his eyes were lined with tears. I could hear him mumbling something about a thing as he burst past me, looking over his shoulder. We ran for what felt like hours, the overgrowth of the path blurring past us in a mix of dark colors, thorns nicking our skin as we forced our way along. We hardly registered them. As we burst from the path into the illuminated streets, our pace was still frantic and panicked. We hardly said a word the entire time that we were running. Eventually, we slowed down as we got closer to our houses, our lungs burning and legs protesting as the adrenaline began to wear off. "What the hell was that?" I managed to utter. The images of the hanging priest whirled around in my mind as I tried to process what we had just seen. Todd just darted forward, his eyes unfocused, staring off in front. "That thing, nailed to it, its face, its fucking face." "What are you talking about, dude?" I asked, concerned. "What did you see?" But Todd just remained silent, staring off and mumbling the same phrases over and over about that thing. It was like he was trapped, reliving the moment in his head over and over, still trapped in that godforsaken church. I shook his shoulder gently. "You okay, dude? Talk to me." He just carried on, staring and mumbling. Fresh panic welled up in me as concern for my best friend began to overwhelm my thoughts. I didn't know what was wrong with him, or how to help him. I needed an adult. They'd be able to help. But if I went to an adult, then they'd know we had snuck out, and they'd ask questions. I looked at Todd again, his blank expression causing a pang of guilt to rise up in my stomach. Sighing, I took him by the arm and started walking to my house. He followed with no resistance, letting me lead him, hardly registering that I was there. Eventually, we came to my house. I made my way up the steps to the porch and rang the doorbell. I had not been trusted with a key yet, so I had to hope against hope that my parents were still awake. I could hear the thudding of the footsteps coming towards the door, then the key turning in the lock as the door opened and the confused, stern face of my dad poked out. When he saw Todd and I, his expression immediately dropped to one of concern and worry. He ushered us in, closing the door behind him. My mother called Todd's parents and sat with them, trying to comfort him while my dad gave me the worst telling off of my life. I could hardly register his words as he yelled at me. I was just focused on Todd, watching his still staring face. He didn't seem to realize my mother was there at all. Images of the hanging priest kept filling my mind. The flailing limbs, the staring, regretful eyes and the wheezing scream echoing in my head. Todd's parents quickly arrived and bustled him into their car as my parents apologized profusely for having to return him in this state. He was mumbling about that thing as they closed the door behind him. I watched as the car pulled away from our house, my eyes following it as it made its way down our street before rounding the corner and disappearing from view. I didn't know that was the last time I would see Todd. He wasn't in school that week. When I tried calling him, his phone rang out, going to voicemail each time. No one in school had heard from him either. It was like he just disappeared. It wasn't until a few days after that my parents told me that Todd wouldn't be going to school anymore. His parents were moving house, and so Todd would be going to another school. Tears welled up in my eyes, and sadness washed over me in a crashing wave. My best friend, he was moving away. I wouldn't be able to hang out with him anymore. Can I go and say goodbye to him before he moves? I asked my mother, my voice shaking.
I don't think that's a good idea, buddy. He's still not well. Maybe we can see about visiting after they move.
I could tell from the tone of her voice that she didn't think there was a possibility of visiting. She was just trying to save me the hurt. To this day, I still have no idea what Todd saw in that church, the thing that he was referring to, but I did finally learn the reason for him moving. After asking my mom again recently, she revealed that Todd had actually tried to return to school shortly before they moved. His parents had driven him to school and were walking him to the main reception. Todd's eyes locked onto something and began shivering before falling into a full-blown panicked fit, screaming hysterically, his eyes wide with the same fearful expression he had worn the night we had visited the church. And he was screaming about something staring at him, smiling at him. His eyes, my mom said, were locked onto the crucifix above the main entrance.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the stories. Those three were some of the most popular over the past year. I was thinking of making a volume 2 if this one is well received, so let me know in the comments. Also, if you don't mind, give me a clue as to what kind of stories you want to hear. Also in the comments, please. Whether it be sci-fi, horror, vampires, werewolves, whatever it is, just let me know. Also, if you click on that dead rotting face below, and then videos, and then popular, you can see all our stories in order of popularity. I say our because there are some amazing writers, and they deserve the bulk of the credit. So hey, and thanks for watching.
And have a very good evening.